Hail Dicelings and ready your incense, because today we talk about religion. So this is part of the ongoing Legend of the Five Rings series that I'll be discussing the new Fantasy Flight beta rules. Some of this is for returning AEG veterans, and a lot of this is for newer players. This video happens to be directed more towards my newer players. This stuff will be entirely the same. There has been no real changes from AEG to Fantasy Flight about the religion side of Legend of the Five Rings, so if this is something that you're already familiar with, I'd suggest going to the next video. But for anybody who wants a refresher course or is new to the setting, welcome. So the last video we talked about the Celestial Order, and so I think that's kind of a good place for us to start. This video is kind of continuing that discussion. So when you die and you pass on, there is the religious side of things that kicks in. Where your soul goes and how you find enlightenment and things like that is kind of dependent upon your views of the world. And usually a character in Legend of the Five Rings will acknowledge all three paths that are available. However, they'll select 1 to 2 that they typically follow the most. So the first one is called Ancestor Worship, which is basically exactly what you think it is. You're honoring your honored ancestors through prayer, thoughts, and petitions, sacrifices, and things like that, burning incense at a shrine, looking for their guidance in life and things like that. This is kind of the most basic and kind of purposeful religion that man had established in Rukagon. There is Animalism, which is kind of an ancient religion that's not really worshipped by the Rukagani. However, there are some people like the Yobanju that still worship that way. So it may come up inside future books, but that's kind of a tangential thing. They're both similar in the fact that they worship the spiritual essence. So the idea is if you are good and you do things correctly inside your life, if a little bit is off, you'll get cycled through the karmatic wheel, reincarnate, and get another chance to do it. If you do well but not perfect, you will be brought back to try and ascend again through your class structure. So the idea is that an Edda, or the lowest level in social structure, will move up to Himen. Himen will move up to the samurai class, and then a samurai who achieves a certain state of perfection will break the cycle. In very rare circumstances, someone of a lower class does break the cycle and forever becomes an ancestor, but they're not really highlighted and talked about since this is mainly a story about samurai. The second religion option that you have available to you is Fortunism. Fortunism is basically directly worshiping the gods, and this is why I said that a lot of them worship 2 to 3 of these things at once. So the idea is that there are the gods like the Kami, that there are a few that still exist. There's the sun and the moon, of course, but there's also the 7 great fortunes. So the fortunes basically are people that have either ascended to become great gods or Kamis, or they've always been and they have a certain domain to them. So the 7 of them are Benten, which is the fortune of romantic love, Bishaman, fortune of strength, Daikoku, fortune of wealth, Ebisu, the honest work, Fuku, I always screw this one up, so bear with me here, Fukuro Kyujin, wisdom and mercy, Hote, which is commitment, and Jurajin, which is longevity. These are the upper crust of the fortunes. However, there are thousands of fortunes that can be covering anything, to include stuff like the spirit of the blade of grass that you are inside your home. These are the kinds of spirits that have direct names, have direct connections, and things like that. Fortunism is interesting because it can be a human that has transcended, or it could be a baseline element that has lived so long that it has developed a fortune state of its own. So for example, Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji has been around forever. It's such a central point to Japan. If Mount Fuji was in L5r, there probably would be a spirit that actually governs Mount Fuji, and that would be a fortune. There are events and places like that in Rokugan. However, they're a little bit rare to find that specific thing. I used one inside the last Legend of the Five Rings game, which was Soigetsu, who is the fortune of the seas. He was very jealous and was kind of angry with a couple that was getting married. So these fortunes should come up inside your game. And the cool thing is kind of like in D&D, gods are not a deniable thing. They exist. They're very tangible. People can manipulate and work with them, or use their magic use their divine essence to their ability to create magical effects. The third kind is Shin Se Ism. So Shin Se Ism is kind of like Taoism, but L5r version. The idea is that you need to live your life as simply and purely as possible, that one finds balance by equalizing all of their elements, the five rings themselves, and finding balance inside there through self-meditation and perfection of oneself. You can actually reach enlightenment. So it's kind of a mix between, in reality, it's mainly based on Taoism, but it's also got a little bit of kind of like Buddhist influence inside there, and Shintoism. All three of those kind of merge together into one basic principle. It does have a book called the Tao Shinsei, which is where it gets its name and why it so closely resembles like the Tao Te Ching for Taoism. So whenever I have players that play along those or play Brothers of Shinsei, which are kind of the Taoist monks of the setting, if you will, that's kind of where we draw inspiration from. The dragon generally follow Shin Se Ism, and that's just because it was written by a dragon. It's one of the more common things that they follow. However, the dragon are also the most religiously diverse group. So while a vast majority of them follow Shin Se Ism, and that's kind of their upfront look, there's just as many that follow Fortunism and follow Ancestor Worship, or just worship any combination of the three. That's really the main thing about religion. We could go deeper and deeper, but what I would recommend is if you're interested more in anything, especially the fortunes, check out the AEG wiki, because all of those fortunes that are there, I'm willing to bet most, if not all of them, will be carried over, because it looks like a lot of what Fantasy Flight is doing is kind of a love letter to the Rokugan that existed when people really fell in love with it pre-Clan Wars area. So with that in mind, guys, thanks for tuning in. And as always, I'll see you at the gaming table.